So today we're going to take a quick look at sewing in ends. This is a version of the Everyday Hugs cardigan, and I've just left a couple of ends that I'm going to show you how I sew it in. There's loads of different ways to do it. I'm just going to show you the one that works for me. Quick note about yarn needles. So here's a few different sizes. Some of them, like this one, they're magnetised, which is very useful for not losing stuff. I like them with a reasonably sharp point, but not too sharp that it splits your yarn. So think about what yarn you're using. Finer yarn, smaller needles. It's the rule of thumb that I go by. So this is an Aran weight yarn. I'm going to use probably this one, I think. Yeah, you can see the metallic magnetic, which is very useful. These things as well. Absolute genius. Otherwise I'd have a lot less yarn needles than I do now. This is for later. So this is where I've joined the cuff. This cardigan is currently inside out, so this is the wrong side I'm going to be sewing into. But hopefully with this, the way I sew in ends, if you're working on something like a scarf that's two-sided, then it'll still work. I can tell this is the wrong side because my cat's shed her hair on it. If you have cats, you'll understand. I probably don't thread my needle in the most correct way, but it works for me. I just fold my yarn over and sort of force it through. So this is where I've joined the ribbing on the cuff. So the way I tend to sew in ends is you can see all these sides of the stitches, and when I sew through I kind of work with the stitches. So because of the way you slip stitch, I've got a tiny gap there, so I'm going to use this as an opportunity to close that. So I'm literally just going to follow where the stitches go, so you're not going to end up with any nasty lumps. I'm going to go round in circles. Just going to work through. I always like to leave quite a long tail, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of, I mean not quite that dramatic, but I'm going to sew it through and change directions so that there's no way that is going to come undone. And I don't like to go over the same place too often, because that's how you get lumps. One thing I will say about reducing the amount of ends that you have to sew in is that if you're working on a big garment like this, where you maybe have to change to a new ball of yarn, but it's the same colour, I use something called the magic knot, which I'll pop a link to a tutorial for that. It's a really simple way to do it, and actually you can just snip the ends off rather than sewing them in. But I do caveat the magic knot because there are some yarns that it doesn't work very well with. Anything that's a bit silky, and mercerised cotton, anything with silk in, they can come undone. Yarns like this I would use the magic knot for. This is a wool and acrylic blend, but I have had instances where it's come undone, so just use it with caution, or use it and then still sew the ends in, or just don't cut the ends off too tight. You can see I'm not actually really paying a huge amount of attention. I'm just kind of working my way through, through, round. You can see that was where I started, so probably what I'll do now is just head back over in that direction. This probably does take a bit longer than just, well, it certainly takes longer than just working over your ends, but again, especially if it's a garment or if it's something that's going to be pulled about, I like to just do it right and do it once, basically. I have had instances when I was a little bit more slapdash about sewing in ends where things have come unravelled, it seems, and it's not ideal, especially if you've already cut the tail quite short. With this method, if you even if an end pops out, you can kind of pull it back a bit and trim it, because you've got such a long yarn tail, that it just gives you that extra scope. So I'm going to work back up towards where we started. And when you're fastening off, what I tend to do is pull it. I try to get the last kind of pulled through a few stitches, and then I pull that a little bit tight. Snip that last end off, and then when you pull it, the end just disappears back in. Almost. So here's another little tip for when you're sewing an end like this that's at the end of a row and you don't want to lose that stitch. So you can kind of see you've got a nice corner there, and you want to do the same. This is the wrong side of my yarn. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to very gently, so this is the kind of post of the stitch, I'm going to very gently just start by putting the end through one and just not pulling it too tight, because if I pulled it too tight, that's just going to disappear. You just, on your first, I don't know what you call it when you put your needle through, but your first stroke, just be gentle. And then you can weave it into the fabric. This is being tricky. Again, just don't pull it too tight. A useful tip is when you're pulling your yarn through, if you place your finger on the other side of where the needle is, as you pull through, you'll be able to feel if the yarn is on the other side, because you'll feel it running over your fingertip. So always use your fingers just to sense, especially if you're working on something that's not easy to kind of see the other side. It's a really just a useful, simple, tactile way of doing it. So that's it really. You can see, you can't really tell where I've woven it through. I've left that a little bit long so you can still see a tuft. Here's a confession. Sometimes when I'm making a garment, I will leave, I don't think I've done it here, but I'll leave a little long tail at the underarm, just so when I'm putting it on, I can double check it's the right way around. Some garments are easy to tell, but other garments like this, it's actually, the fabric's reversible, so it's actually hard to tell the wrong and the right side. So that's my other little tip. But I'm going to crack on with the rest of these ends and then put this on.